Overall, my title sequence tells the story of an arsonist while hinting at deeper meanings and causations for her acting the way that she does. This follows the conventions of a psychological thriller because it typically starts with an intense scene, possibly one that includes chasing or death, while beginning to hint at other aspects. The other aspect that I am referring to is the fact that the arsonist has borderline personality disorder. Since she is so young and does not have strong parental figures who are around to notice odd behavior or take her to psychologists, she is not diagnosed and therefore has no support or medicine to help. The scene did not make the cut, but it was to show her abandonment. Other inclusions were the impulsivity of winning the stuffed animal, binge eating, self-harm, and the arson itself. While the costuming is somewhat typical for the victims, I tried to have the arsonist wear lighter colors, though we couldn't find a white or gray jacket like I had wanted. Typically, a villain character is shown in darker clothes, so I wanted to challenge that convention. The lighting begins more high-key but changes to low-key lighting, which adds shadows and contrast to the image. Some of the properties that were included were a razor, a pile of trash, and a stuffed animal. There is the recurring color red, which is used more in relation to the arsonist. The setting uses conventions, as the forest is considered a remote and isolated area. This adds to the victim's feeling of hopelessness. The sound in this video uses the conventions of the genre because it creates tension through the use of an instrument sound with no lyrics. It can sometimes be considered as creepy sounding. A common example of this can be found in The Shining, Seven, and more. The editing had a relatively fast pace during my opening. While part of this was due to time restrictions, it was also deliberate in some aspects. The general scramble adds to the feeling of anxiety that builds throughout the clip, starting with the jump cuts. The titles in this sequence fairly use conventions for psychological thrillers. They are block letters, all caps. A big difference for my project is that I included someone as an assistant director, which is never put in an opening credits scene. My reasoning for doing so, however, is that she needed credit for helping me, but did not do the work of any other job to be called such. If end credits had been included, Kira's name would have only been placed there. During this opening sequence, there are a few aspects of representation. The biggest choice I made was to have the arsonist be female. I felt that there were not many females that are portrayed in such a role, and I wanted to give the character that sort of power. As for the victims, they are one male and one female because it did not really matter what their genders were. The only relationship shown was heterosexual, mostly for ease. These characters date in real life. The arsonist is white because I wanted to show them in that role. While one victim is also white, the other is Hispanic. Again, this was slightly for ease, but I wanted to make sure that not every character was white. Throughout the clip, I tried to vary the cinematography through a mix of close-ups, wide angles, and others. I used high angles initially to show a greater distance, like when the arsonist is seen in the same shot as the victims, but it changed to show that the victims had fallen down a hill. The low-angle shot of the arsonist puts her in a role of power, while the high-angle shot of the victims shows that they do not have power anymore. This specific cinematography uses conventions mostly, though perhaps more shots could have been close-up. There is a tilt and pan shot used to disclose more information. This used conventions because it added a bit more suspense as the camera is moving, because the audience may wonder what is the purpose of such movement. When looking for a production company to choose, I went through a range of different ones, including Taylor Lane Productions, Echo Lake Entertainment, Dimension Films, and Atomic Monster. After studying each of these, I felt that Echo Lake Entertainment would be the best fit for my film. However, after making this decision, I still wasn't satisfied with choosing Echo Lake Entertainment, so I researched more. The next company that I chose to research was Lionsgate. Lionsgate was a larger production company that still had many movies that fit with the same genre as my film. Lionsgate is also a bit smaller of a company, enough so that I'd feel more comfortable working with them. Some of the other movies produced by Lionsgate that would fit into the thriller or psychological thriller genre are The Condemned, The Descent, The Cabin in the Woods, American Psycho, and Requiem for a Dream. Since Lionsgate also doubles as a distribution company, I would hopefully be able to use them for exhibition and marketing. If my film were to be released theatrically, I believe it would be better to platform or limit it to fewer theaters. This way the audience's reaction could be gauged before releasing it to more. As for non-theatric release, I am not opposed to the idea of releasing my film on online platforms like Netflix or Amazon. I believe I would like Netflix better because I feel that more people watch shows and films from Netflix. Due to the nature of the content usually included in psychological thrillers, the usual age that is my target audience is late teens to younger adults, though adults of all ages may watch them as well. I would have to be cautious as to what my rating is because many psychological thrillers can be rated R, which restricts the age. As for genders, my film I would want to target both genders that are adults. The class should not matter, and neither should race. I want all races to be in the audience and to enjoy the film equally. This is my target audience because I feel that they would be able to understand the message behind the film and also enjoy the process on getting to the display of that message. Throughout the film process, there are many things that I learned. Planning and drafting can be a tedious aspect of filmmaking, but it is very important to have laid out all that needs to be done and when. Sometimes when directing, it is hard to portray what exactly it is that I want to happen. You're gonna be crawling backwards as he does the drag. Drag, ha! I want you to be a little past him, and then she reaches for him.
Yeah.
You are scared. You are desperate because you have fallen. You can't get up.
Yes. Life alert.
You're both going backwards. I'll just sort of, not like you're frantic, but don't like move like, don't like yeet backwards. All right, you ready? Yeah. Fear, frantic. But when you do it, can you show me more fear and not just a blank face?
Okay.
I know that's
pretty good with that blank face.
I know, but
I can try. Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, so take your right hand and kind of like rub your forehead with it. But the biggest thing I learned is to simply guide the actor as they go to let them know what I want. My first direction will be at you, and then my second will be at her. Okay, now follow. Now stand up and walk away. Overall, shooting is not difficult. Definitely shoot more than you think you'll need. There are several scenes that I either did not plan and were created on the spot, or I thought I was going to have to use a different scene but chose that one instead. One very, very important thing I learned is that if you're going to make a scene with jump cuts, use something to steady the camera. During the revision and editing phase, sometimes it can be good to just jump into the process. I also learned that the ordering of clips can be simultaneously very important but also flexible. I was able to mess with the order in a couple ways until I found one that fit better with the flow of the story. Another thing I learned was just how important color correction and visual editing can be. Some scenes needed to be lighter, others needed more contrast. Especially since the shots were filmed outside, they needed to be edited into looking around the same amount of light or dark. Even scenes that I did not think needed correction were enhanced by some touching up. Sound can take a very long time to edit. I learned that layering sound is important but can be very tedious. I also had to look out for discrepancies in the sound. There are a few cases where there was a thud or other noise in the background, so I had to edit that part out and replay another portion to fix it. There was also a huge contrast between the volume of certain sounds. The leaves, for example, were very, very loud, while the background music and breathing were much softer. I'm not sure if there was a way I could have fixed that when recording, but perhaps I could be more cautious or sensitive to it next time. I learned to be flexible while shooting and editing as well. Sometimes there were certain scenes that I had in mind that just didn't come out the way I thought they were going to, for good or bad reasons. Other times, a scene was added or improvised, and it turned out well too. During production, I used iPhones to shoot the film. Sound for this project was also recorded on an iPhone. A borrowed Apple computer from the school is what all editing was completed on. After this task, I am more acquainted with iMovie. I actually had no idea that color correction could be used in iMovie, so I learned about the various aspects of how to do that. I feel that I am more confident in my abilities to shoot and edit now that I have had practice.